Strong bodies,
kind hearts,
unstoppable minds.
You're listening to Strong Girls Pod,
where strong women share their stories
to inspire strong girls.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Strong Girls Pod. As always, I'm your host, Charlie Ekstrom, and I am here graced by an absolute superstar stud of the summer, Miss Kristen Faulkner. If you don't know her, you should probably look into her because she is a two-time Olympic gold medalist at the Paris Games. She won on the track and the road cyclist and won a gold medal in an event that she wasn't originally supposed to compete in, and the first U.S. medal in 40 years. So she's a superstar. If you don't know about her, look into her or get to know her on this episode because we are graced by an absolute legend. So Kristen, thank you so much for coming and joining us.
Thank you. I think that's the best intro I've ever had on a podcast. So, wow. Thank you guys. I'm excited.
Well, we're excited to have you. And I mean, I'm glad that it's maybe the best one. I feel like I'm wearing a badge of honor with that then. I mean, I just was stating fact. It was pretty easy. For our listeners who don't know you, there may be people who have seen your amazing summer that you've started. You've got one more event coming at the World Championships, which we're so excited to root you on September 28th. But for your background, prior to the Olympics, prior to what I just cued you in on, would you start opening up the Kristen file and give us a little bit into your career, spanning through why you chose your sport, what you competed in prior to your sport, what you did before, what you're doing now? Let's open up the file and hear a little bit more about you.
Yeah, I can go way back. So I was born and raised in Homer, Alaska. It's a small fishing town and kind of at the end of the road. It's 4.5 hours from the nearest big airport. I was the fourth of 5 kids. And so I had 3 brothers and a sister. And my entire life, I was always trying to keep up with them. You know, I tell this story of my brother, the first time I ever got on a bike. I was on a tricycle, he was on a bike, and he said, "Look, Kristen, I don't need training wheels." So then I went out and I was like, I'm going to learn how to ride without training wheels. And I showed up and I said, "William, look, I can ride with no training wheels." And then he goes, "I can ride with no feet." So I went and I said, "Oh, okay, I'm going to learn to ride with no feet." And then, you know, he came back the next day, "I can ride with one hand," you know. And so I feel like that was just my entire childhood was, you know, my brothers trying to one up me and forcing me to keep up with them. And I think that's where I developed from a really young age, kind of like resilience and just like always trying to be better and keep up with them. So that's what I did. A lot of sports growing up. I was a swimmer primarily, but I also did like cross country running. I did track, I did volleyball, basketball, soccer. I think every time there was a new sport at school, I just tried it, but I never had a lot of hand-eye coordination. So I kind of just stuck with endurance sports. So swimming, rowing, and running and cycling. Then I went to college. Well, I went to Andover, learned how to row. And then I went and rowed in college at Harvard and graduated, moved to New York City for a job at venture capital. And that was when I discovered cycling. So I was 6 months into my job in venture capital, living in Manhattan. And I really missed the camaraderie of team sports that I'd had when I was in college. And I missed the competition. I missed the challenge of pushing myself and getting better every day. And I was on the elliptical in the basement of my apartment, and I'd been on there like 5 times Monday through Friday. And I was just like, okay, I cannot do another day on the elliptical. Like, I have to get out to Central Park and do something fun with a team, with girls that are strong, and just like go be a college athlete again. So I heard about this introductory cycling clinic in Central Park. I borrowed a friend's bike. He was like 6'3", way too big on me. The bike was really big. I showed up in running shorts and sneakers, no bike computer, a crooked helmet, like literally, I don't even think I had sunglasses. And they taught us how to ride around cones, how to clip into pedals. Well, they taught me how to clip into pedals like 2 sessions later. But it was really just this beginner's class. And it was really humbling. I mean, I had a lot of fun. I was just like, oh, I'm going to learn a new skill. And I had no pressure on myself for it because it was just kind of picking up a new hobby that I had no expectations for myself. I just wanted to go have fun and meet some strong women. And so that's what I did. And I also, being from Alaska, living in Manhattan, you know, there's so many concrete buildings, and I just really wanted to be in the outdoors every day, see a little bit of grass, some trees. And so Central Park in the mornings was really my outlet when I was working so many hours inside of a tall office building. And so I quickly found that cycling kind of gave me a lot of the things that I was looking for that I wasn't getting at work. You know, actually the first company I worked for right out of college, there were 16 male partners at the firm and no female partners. And so even just like having older women as mentors to really, teach me and coach me was something I'd had so many strong women on my sports team and this group of computer science women at Harvard. And so that was really nice for me to just have that immediate outlet of kind of strong women working together on a team. And that was fun for me. And so I kind of just started going every day in the morning. I was like, this is really fun. I had to wake up really early. I mean, I was 24 living in New York City and I was going to bed at like 9 p.m. on Fridays for races on Saturday morning. So it wasn't like a normal 20 something in New York City, but it was really fun. And then let's see, about a year and a half after going to that clinic, I moved to California. I started doing some regional races, some bigger races. Pretty much every weekend I was going to races or doing really long rides and then training for about 2 hours in the morning before work. And I just progressively got more intense and competitive as time went on. So then I signed with my first professional team in 2020, which was a domestic American team. I was still working full time. So my plan was just kind of go to races on the weekends and train during the week. But 2020 was COVID. So the only way that I could race was to have me go to Europe because there were no races in America. So I convinced my boss to let me take a month where I went to Europe and raced and worked remotely in halftime. I don't know how she let me do it, but she did. And that's when I first discovered European racing. And I came back from that race block and I said, wow, I really want to do this full time. So I had this big decision and I ended up leaving my job and moving to Europe. So that's kind of the genesis of my story. Kind of covers a lot of ground, but that's how I got into cycling.
Wow. I love that you were like, okay, let me test out this entirely new sport. I've moved in New York. I've started my new job. I'm missing sports and I'm just going to try it. I'm going to test it out and see how I like it. And then it just kind of catalyzed this entire path for you to pursue a full-time cycling career. Didn't realize that you moved to Europe full-time to train and to do it. And I love that it literally came to that cycling clinic that you just joined to see and to get outside away from the elliptical. I'm also not a fan of the elliptical, but I'm also not really an endurance sport person. I'm more of a short sprints and quick bursts. The hand-eye coordination's a little decent on my end, but I admire any endurance athlete just because of the fact that it's never been a passion of mine. But I can say that the elliptical is an exceptional no for me. So I can't blame you for getting out there.
Yeah, I must have been a little desperate to wake up at 6 a.m. for a sport I'd never done before.
I mean, you probably had some early mornings rowing at Harvard too. So it probably was just second nature for you at that point.
Yeah, it's funny. People are like, why did you wake up so early? Like, why were you so into cycling so quickly? And it's funny because in college we had to wake up at 6 a.m. for morning practice. And then we were studying the rest of the day. And I think for me, when I moved to New York, there was an element to that structure and that routine that I really liked, where I would do my morning workout and then I would go do my work and classes. And so when I moved to New York and I started doing that every day, I would wake up in the morning and then go to work. It did feel like second nature. It didn't feel like this really hard routine I needed to kickstart. It didn't feel like a New Year's resolution that I was like struggling to hang on to. It felt like an extension of what I had done for the last 4 years, and in some ways 8 years. In high school we had practice in the afternoon, but just still having that structure where you have your work time and then you have your exercise time, and I liked that. And so when I started doing it, it didn't feel abnormal. The abnormal part was actually the first 6 months where I wasn't doing that. Like, that was the weird part for me.
I believe it. I remember when I first came out and started playing Pro Beach full time, I literally had the opposite effect of where I started practicing in the mornings out here, but I had always practiced afternoons. It was always like class, school, and then practices after, because we just had the situation of if the sun wasn't up, we literally could not see the volleyball. So we just had to wait for the sun to be up. So I was so used to that routine. And then when I moved to LA and I started training full time out here, it was like morning practice every single day, like get used to it. And I can relate 100% now that I'm on the wave of training in the mornings and practicing in the mornings. I can't believe that I was so averse to it in college, because it is the best thing ever. It's like I get to go and be so productive because I've had the best morning ever. I'm like a little tired, but really just like energized for the day to come. And so I love that it was second nature for you, and that it probably made it even easier to transition into that second phase of life. Like, hard first 6 months, but then after you get there, it becomes so much easier because you're just used to what's been going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was nice too, because, if you have a if you have a really hard day at work or you're stressed or you have all these things going on, it can actually clear your head, to just like to wake up, to start your day feeling fresh, feeling accomplished. You go to your desk and you're like, okay, I can take on anything today. You feel really good and really energized when you start your day.
Exactly. 100%. Looking at your move to Europe, what was it like? Like, I know that you were like, it felt natural to me because I had gone and I had taken this chance, but then I really wanted to actually dive into it. What was it like kind of immersing yourself into the European cycling culture, just moving to Europe in general? That's a huge move. I mean, you'd already had a big move from Alaska when you went to school on the East Coast, but a second big move later in, I mean, not later in life, but in your 20s. That's a huge change and huge shift and huge leap of faith. And I'd love to hear about kind of the mindset that you had when you were going into that journey.
Yeah, to be honest, it was quite scary. So I was working this really great job in venture capital. I had this amazing set of bosses. I was the only non-partner at the firm. I had great career trajectory. I was making good money. I had a great lifestyle. And so there was like really, I mean, from the outside, it was like I had everything that I've been working for. And I actually really enjoyed my job. I wasn't unhappy. And so I think that's what made it even harder was like I didn't feel like I wanted to leave my job, but I just felt this calling to go and see what I could do with cycling. And I noticed during that year that I was happiest when I was on my bike. I was often visualizing what it would be like to be a professional cyclist in Europe. All the biggest races, all the world champions, all the competitors are in Europe. And so I knew if I ever wanted to achieve my potential with the sport, I had to go to Europe. And so I kind of reached this point where I was like, well, venture capital is something I can do when I'm 60. I can always come back to it, but I can't be a professional athlete for the rest of my life. I can't be an Olympian for the rest of my life. So if there's a time to do this, it's now. Like it's either now or never. And I think there's an element of urgency that actually pushed me to go. If it had been something I could have done for the rest of my life, maybe I would have delayed it and never done it. But I felt this sense of kind of urgency. And to be honest, I didn't actually have a lot of support at the beginning. Like none of my friends or family really knew what professional cycling was. It wasn't televised in the media back then, so they couldn't watch me on TV. They didn't know that it was a real profession. There was barely any money in the sport. I think I made $7,000 as a stipend my first year. Like there was, I was living off savings. I was sleeping on friends' couches when I came to the US to visit. It was really not like a logical move by any means. And I think my parents too, they also were like a little worried about me. They were like, Kristen, like you have this amazing trajectory in front of you. Like, why are you just getting up and leaving? And so I really had to kind of surround myself with a circle of people who supported me. And one of those people at the time was my coach. He had raced in Europe for, 20 years basically. And so I was able to lean on him for like, hey, am I going crazy? Like, is this actually a profession? Can I do this for a living? Is it, hard? And so he was really helpful. And so ultimately I decided to make the jump and just try it. In my head, I was like, I'll try it for a year. If I don't like it, I can always come back to America and try to get a job in tech or at Starbucks or do whatever I need to. But I have 1 year of savings. I can go try this for a year. And so that's what I did. And so the plan was, I was on a 1-year contract. My plan was to go for a year and just see, if it ended up being a sabbatical for a year, okay, I'd go back to finance afterwards, And that's really how I had to approach it because it made it much less intimidating. And I think people often ask me like, oh, you completely pivoted your life. You went off and did this thing. And I was like, well, yes, but at the time I wasn't planning to make a 10-year career out of it. I wasn't thinking about going to the Olympics right away. Like for me, it was, okay, I'll take a 1-year sabbatical and see what happens. And I was really open-minded about it. And I think that's how I had to be because then I wasn't thinking about, what's going to happen in 10 years from now. How's this go? And I knew that if I just took a year off work, it wouldn't be the end of my career. And so that's what I did. And when I moved to Europe, I didn't know anybody. I had some teammates who raced with me in Europe, but I moved to Girona, Spain. I didn't know anyone there. I showed up with 2 bike bags and a suitcase and had to haul them up 4 sets of cobblestone stairs to my Airbnb, which was on the 4th floor of, and no elevator. And so just like my first day there was, I just broke down crying. I was like, what am I doing? I can't even carry my suitcases into my door without crying. Like I maybe made a big mistake, but I decided, I was going to go through it for the year and then just see what happened. And I basically said, I have 1 year to prove myself and 1 year to prove to myself if I want to do this. And so I went all out for that first year. I learned everything I could. I asked a ton of questions. I rewatched every single race. I made notes before the races. I made notes after the races. I asked my coach and director for feedback on how I was doing, and really just tried to absorb as much as possible, because I said I have 1 year. And at the end of the 1 year, I'm either good enough or I'm not, and that's it. And part of that was just the circumstances. Like, I didn't have the savings to keep going for 5 years without making any money. And so I was like, I have to get a contract, like a better contract after 1 year. And the only way I can do that is if I'm good enough. So I have 1 year to get good. And that's kind of what spurred me, I think, to improve so quickly.
It's really incredible to just sit in here and it's like, okay, I have 1 year. It was like a 1 year test to just see where it went. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, wow. Think of if it only would have lasted 1 year. But then it didn't, thank goodness, because we have where you're at today. But it was a 1 year shot and you took it and you ran with it. And I love hearing like it wasn't easy all the time, because I think that there is a huge piece of some of the mainstream element of sport where it looks really glorious. And it's like, okay, this comes easy to some people. You don't get to hear the backstory to all of it. And for you, it's like you took this giant risk. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, could you have gone back to your career? Yes, but you put a big career that you really enjoyed on pause to run this risk and see if you could really do the dang thing. And not only did you actually end up becoming like full-time professional cyclist, really successful, but you fast forward and it's like, okay, could you have imagined that in 2024 you were in the place that you were at now? Probably not at the time, but being able to follow and to continue on that journey and look back, and it was like, okay, I took a 1 year risk and it ended up creating an incredibly high reward.
Yeah, and I often say there's 99% of the work that no one sees, and then there's 1% of the glory that everyone sees. And that's true. And I think if you want to pursue something and you have this big goal, that's how it's going to be. There's going to be, the 99% for me, that's like changing flat tires in the rain. It's going out and riding at 5 a.m. when I was up until 10:30, 11 midnight, maybe reading investment memos. It's, missing friends' weddings and birthdays and some family holidays. It is being on the other side of the world with no family, no friends, and trying to make it work. I eventually made friends, but it took a little while. And it's like falling down in a race and getting cuts and scrapes and bruises and getting up and the peloton's riding away. And I'm like, well, I have to chase back. I have to make it. Like, I have 1 year to prove myself, and that's the 99% that people don't see, and it's the stretching. It's the core work you do in the morning. It's going to the gym. It's, studying the course ahead of time. It is doing your training and like feeling like you're going to throw up sometimes and you're thirsty and it's hot. And that's really what goes into it. And I think after my Olympic gold, so much of the media was like, she quit her job and then she won 2 gold medals, and I think that's the story. But I think that's true for a lot of athletes. I think it's true for a lot of people who are successful. There's kind of this like easygoing journey that sounds very fanciful from the outside, but the people who are in it, they will say that 99% of it is not glamorous. You're staying in small hotel rooms with tiny beds and your roommate snores. And it's just like you're hauling bike bags around the US every time you travel to, for the holidays, and then your bike bags get lost. And then, it's just like, there's a lot of things that happen. And even with startups, I used to work in startups, and people see like, Mark Zuckerberg, or they see all these, CEOs who started big companies, and they're like, wow, that's an amazing story. But I just think people don't see what happens behind the scenes and the grinding and the years and the sacrifices that go in. So I do want to remind people that it's definitely not glamorous, for the majority of the time.
Exactly. When you look at the fact on the paper, like, yes, you did quit your job and you did then win 2 gold medals in a later date, but there was so much more to that story that doesn't get seen or doesn't get necessarily portrayed. And a lot of that comes to a huge amount of work in mental fortitude. And you're looking at it, and it goes into kind of that core idea that you're capable of anything that you're able to put your mind to. You determine your own fate, but a lot of that is because of mindset work. And looking at, again, going back to that whole idea of like really leaping forward into this career and really leaping forward into the grinding through some of the moments that aren't pretty, like changing flat tires in the rain, like you'd mentioned, there's such an element of fortitude and such an amount of strength that goes into that. And it warms my heart to hear it and to just think about it. It doesn't warm my heart to hear about you sitting in the rain changing tires, but to think about the amount of work that was put in to go through it. It really aligns with the whole core ideas of Strong Girls United, what we do here, it's our mission is empowering girls and women through sports, mental skills training, mentorship, all of it. And for you, it's like you put in the mental skills training in your sport to then be able to gain that strength and to be able to go out and compete at the biggest stage and then succeed. I'm in awe of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring up the mental strength, because I think sometimes, people ask me a lot, like, how do you stay motivated? How do you keep through the hard times? And, I have answers like, keep your eyes on the prize and focus on what you can control and know that, this hard part is temporary. But I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to just like practice makes perfect. And like the more you practice putting yourself in hard situations, the more, I don't want to say like the easier they get over time, but the more comfortable and the more routine those hard situations become. And so if you haven't done a workout in 5 years and then you go to your first workout, like it's going to be so hard. But if you do a workout every day for 5 years, like that extra day's workout isn't going to feel as hard. And you might be in the same physical pain, but you've just learned how to process it and go through it better. You learn better mental skills that help you through it. And so I think the best answer I can give is like, if you want to be good at pushing through hard situations, then put yourself in hard situations, and do it and often enough. And then you can start to take on like harder and harder things and have the mental fortitude and the mental capacity to kind of give yourself mantras or, just focus on different things or to distract yourself from the pain or, give yourself something to look forward to or start to visualize the end game. And like you kind of learn tricks that work for yourself that really help you through those hard times. And it makes the hard times less hard. So I think from a very young age, I was a swimmer and I went to swim meets. And then I just think the more challenging self positions we put ourselves in, the better we get at them and the better we are able to handle situations we haven't seen before, because we have the confidence like, oh, I don't necessarily know how to solve this yet, but I trust that I can figure it out because I've figured out many situations before that I didn't know how to solve. And I think so much of what sport has given me is that confidence. It's like, I can get through a hard workout. I can figure out a problem. I know because I've done this 100 times before. And I think that's what sports is really great for is teaching people that, you can get through these hard situations because you've done so many before.
Absolutely. You gave me goosebumps there. It's like I'm wearing a sweater so you can't see them, but you gave me goosebumps thinking about it because it's so true. It is the whole idea of like the very cliche practice makes perfect, but like practicing the tough situations make the then tough situations easier. Not easier in the physical capacity, but easier in the mental capacity. And I've done this before. I think something that I've talked about a lot in career is the idea of visualization and practice in that visualization of like knowing that tough situation that you can then accelerate yourself forward after you visualized a moment. And whether it comes down to that or it's the actual act of practicing, whether it's freezing cold outside, you're waking up with when you didn't sleep well the night before, but you're still going out and training, it's going to make all of the little things or even the big things that are really hard become easier because you've already done the hard things before. I liked when I like hearing it from you too, because you're like, I've done this my whole life. You really have, because you've been again, going back to the whole idea of being an endurance athlete, like endurance sports are hard innately, like any sport is hard, but endurance sports are a different beast. And I say this as a non-endurance athlete, but I feel like endurance and non-endurance athletes can agree that there's like an element of pain that comes from your sport. And there's an element of just really, really grinding through the toughest of tough of a lot of times, like going through some pain while you're actively competing. And again, going back to the more you do it, the less the pain becomes a factor. It's like, okay, yeah, if you didn't cycle for 5 years and you're going back and going out for the first time, you're probably going to be really sore and it's going to be the worst time ever. But if you do it every day for 5 years, it's the exact same amount of physical strain. It's just become easier for you over time.
Yeah. And I think it's really important for people to remember that, because oftentimes when we start something new, the first day is so hard. And then we think to ourselves, how can I keep this up? How can I do this every day? And then you start to feel demotivated because it's extra hard. And I actually want to remind people that the opposite happens. It gets easier the more you do it. And so when people, if they have a New Year's resolution or if they're picking up a new sport or if they're starting a new job at work or, whatever it is, the first day is always the hardest. And then the second day is just a tad bit easier. And then the third is just a tad bit easier. And you also get to this point where, sometimes I'll look at a workout that my coach gives me and I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know if I can do that. That is so hard. And then I just think, okay, there have been dozens of times in my life where I've seen a hard workout, didn't think I could do it, and then I did it. So maybe that's true today, and it just gives you that extra bit of confidence. Whereas if it's the first time you've ever looked at a hard workout and not known if you could do it, you're like, I really don't know. And you're going to have so much more doubt. But if you've been in that situation before and overcome it, then suddenly you start to think, okay, maybe this is one of those situations. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it's not going to be as bad, and I think that's the confidence that comes with experience.
Absolutely. The tough workout thing really hits home. I think of one specific exercise of like workouts over the years. I've been lifting for a long time because it's vital to sport, but I think of pull-ups like were my personal kryptonite for a really long time. So I just started smiling as you were saying it because I'm like, yep, this sounds a lot like pull-ups to me, because every single time I saw pull-ups or chin-ups on that card, it just was like the biggest mental block for me, especially prior to college. I mean, I don't even know if I would have attempted to try to actually push through them prior to going to college. And our trainer would put it on our cards and I'm like, Tyler, I don't think I got this one. And it's, put a band on then. You got this, make it happen. And over the years, it was really, really hard to start. I had skinny little arms and I could hit the ball really hard in volleyball, but I couldn't necessarily push a bunch of weight. And then it became this whole thing for me of like, okay, my arms may not be the strongest. I'm going to get really strong in everything else and build my confidence in the gym, build my confidence in the exercise. And then by my senior year, I was like whipping out body weight pull-ups. And I looked back, I was like, oh, I love these things now. I look at the card, and if I get pull-ups or chin-ups on the card now, I'm like excited because I'm like, oh, I get to do these. And it's that training. I would have never fathomed. 14-year-old Charlie would have never thought that 23-year-old Charlie is like excited to do pull-ups. But I'll rip them out now, and I'm like, this is so much fun. And I'll go until I have to put a band on again, and a band is not shameful to me anymore. It's just exciting that I get to do the exercise at all. And so the really, really push through hard things. Like, I know that I simplified it a lot by saying pull-ups, but there is an element there of doing something crazy, doing something really challenging, doing something that has a mental block becomes easier when you've done other things that have mental blocks associated.
Yeah. And there's a real transformation that happens. I actually, when I started cycling, there were a lot of things I was really bad at and really dreaded. Like the 1 to 5 minute efforts, I was like, oh, they're so painful. Like, I just don't even want to do them. They're uncomfortable. They hurt. My lungs hurt. My legs hurt. Like, they're the hardest. It's kind of equivalent to maybe like an 800 on the track or a 400 on the track. And, someone made this point. They were like, you have to do your weak areas because that's how you get better at them. And it's really true. So I started actually doing the workouts that were super uncomfortable for me. I was like, if I don't like it and I dread it and it's uncomfortable and it's like the bad kind of hurt, like, if you do a workout and you're going to nail it, it hurts, but you feel good when you're doing it. But when you're bad at something and you do it, you're like, oh, this is like a bad hurt. Like, it just doesn't, like, I don't like this exhilaration, But I started doing all the things I was bad at, and eventually I started getting good at them, and then they became more fun, because it's always more fun to do something when you are good at it and you feel good. And the nice part about working on your weaknesses that way is you get to a point where you're bad at fewer things, and so you start to dread fewer workouts. And that's a really fun place to be, because now my coach will give me a workout and I'm like, oh, I can do that. I can do that. I can do that. Whereas half of those workouts, if he had given me 5 years ago before I'd really worked on these weaknesses, I would have been like, oh, like cringy. Like, I don't think I'm going to feel good today, and that's a really big motivator too, to do the things you're bad at.
To do the things you're bad at in order to get better at them, and in order to make the things that you're bad at almost become your strengths in the long run. It's like, that was really hard then, but now I'm pretty good at that because I really put in the work.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're going to not dread as many workouts, not dread as many things in your life.
Exactly. Now, I want to pivot us a little bit here, and I want to go into your journey, not just through the start of cycling, but I want to look into your Olympic journey a little bit. And I know it's been the talk of the town of where you've gotten to now, but I also, what we were talking about of the 1% of glory was shown, and the 99% of the backstory of it wasn't. And you've trained, you moved all the way to Europe, and then you've been competing for Team USA. And you'd mentioned before we were on this call that you're at the Olympic Training Center right now in Colorado, and you're prepping for your world championships. And you've kind of had this semi-nomadic lifestyle as you've trained on this Olympic journey. And I would love to just hear going back to the whole mindset element of what was the mindset element of going on this Olympic pursuit, and what was the start and kind of achieving the goal of making that roster? What did it feel like for you?
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. Even though I never thought I would become an Olympian with cycling, I went to this introductory clinic. I did watch the Olympics every single time the Olympics played when I was a kid. I would watch them. And so I remember being 8 years old, and I was a swimmer. I had just gone to my first swim meet. Michael Phelps was on TV. I think he was like entering his prime. And I was like, wow, these swimmers are so good. I want to be like them one day. Like, I want to go to the Olympics one day and do what they're doing. And I just have this memory of being really young and watching the Olympics and just being completely in awe and really feeling like I wanted to do it one day. And so even though, when I was a rower, I thought, in the back of my head the whole time, like, oh, maybe I could go to the Olympics for rowing one day. And life happened and things got in the way. And then when I started getting into cycling, that kind of childhood dream came back to me. And I was like, look, I actually really want to do this. It's going to be harder because I picked up the sport quite late in life, but this is kind of like my last chance to do it. Like, I'm not going to pick up another sport in my 30s and try to go to the Olympics. Like, this is it. Like, the time is now. And so I really, I would say once I moved to California, I joined my first professional team. That's when I really was like, I want to make the Olympics for cycling. And so it was actually, I started, doing a lot of road rides, trying to make the road cycling team for Tokyo, but I was just too early in my career. I said, okay, well, Paris is around the corner. And so I really set my sights on trying to make the Paris team. And I basically had two routes to go. The one was the road and the other was the track. And they both were interesting to me in different ways. And in 2019, in the end of 2019, I messaged the track coach. And I just wanted to try the track. I wasn't necessarily thinking of the Olympics right then, but I was thinking down the road for the Olympics. I was like, maybe one day I'd want to go to the Olympics for track. So I reached out to the coach. I asked him if I could kind of try out for him and try out for the national team. And he looked at my numbers and he was like, no, it's like, sorry, you're just not good enough. and I was like really bummed about it. And I was like completely rejected and I was really heartbroken. And so I asked him, like, what do I need to get better at? And he kind of gave me this long list. And I worked on those things for the next 2 years. And then 2 years later, I actually won a race that was like a 5-minute power race. And that was exactly what the track race was. So he reached out to me after 2 years and he reached out to my coach and they're like, hey, we want to get you on the track. So it was 2 years after I got rejected that I came back into the track program. And I went to my first track camp and my starts were so bad. Actually, the start is so you start from a standing start when you're on the track and then you kind of get up to speed. And I'd never been really good at the accelerations, like the really kind of punchy starts, sprints, efforts. And my start was so bad that he was timing all the girls and like how fast their starts were. Because it was like kind of a tryout camp. And he didn't even time mine because it was so bad. He was like, I don't even want to know what this girl's time is. And he told me, like, Kristen, you're really strong, but your starts, like, they're your kryptonite. Like, you're not going to make the team with these starts. And so I just started doing as much as I could for my starts. I started doing like core and glute activations in the morning. I would start going to the gym that fall. I started doing starts on the road, starts on the track. I would do extra starts after practice, and I really worked on them. And he told me years later that in his 30 years of coaching, I had the worst start he's ever seen in his life. and so, like, here I was, like, I tried to make the team 2 years ago. He rejected me. I showed up 2 years later. He had some hope for me. And then I was just the worst starter he'd ever seen in his entire life. So, like, I didn't have, like, I wasn't naturally talented at this in any way. And so, like, if anyone's listening, I don't want you to think you have to be born good at something to make, to become a gold medalist or to become great at it, because I was literally the worst starter he'd ever seen in his life. And so, and he's like he's a good coach. I mean, he's worked in Australia, he's worked in America, he's worked in a lot of different programs and seen a lot of athletes in his years. And there were like over 20 girls at this camp. So it wasn't even like I was the worst at this camp. I was just dead worst he'd ever seen. And so basically for the next year and a half, I like really tried to work on my start and work on the other things that he needed me to be good at. And I came to a selection camp in the fall of 2023. Basically, every single day at this camp, I went to probably at least 50 days of camp over the next year. And every single one of those days at camp was a tryout. Like every single day, he was testing us. He was seeing if we were good. And it was like, would I make it to the next camp? Would I get invited back 2 weeks later? And that was the pressure that I was under leading up. And in the year before the Olympics was, I started out with the worst start he'd ever seen. And I basically had every single day to try to make it to the next camp. and just get invited back. So that's really what it was like. And it was really hard. I mean, the girls on the team, so when I started on Team Pursuit, which is a track race, there's 4 girls who race. And at the Olympics, I was the only one of those 4 who hadn't earned a medal before in the race, because 2 of them had won a medal in Rio in this exact event. And then the other 3 girls had all won a medal in Tokyo. And so I came in, even once I made the team. So eventually I qualified, I made the team. It was a big, I can talk about that process again. But once I made the team, then it was like, okay, I'm the least experienced on the team. I'm the only one of these 4 girls who hasn't earned a medal. Like, if we don't earn a medal at the Olympics in Paris, that's kind of my fault, you know? And so maybe it wasn't my fault, but it felt like that. It felt like I was going to be the difference between whether they made a medal or not. And so just when I found out I'd made the team, I was like, oh, I could relax, you know, like my dream has finally come true. But in reality, the work was just starting, because now I had this other hurdle to overcome, which was I had to be good enough, not just to make the team, but to earn a medal with the team. Because if I didn't, I'd probably be the reason why they didn't earn a medal. And so I just felt like every single day for a year and a half leading up to the Olympics was this incredible amount of pressure to perform and to really focus on improving as much as I could leading up to race day.
Wow. I love the saying that pressure is a privilege, but the pressure for you, I feel like, was a definite privilege in that setting of like, yes, it was brutal, but it also prepared you for then what ended up happening at the Olympics was not only did you win a medal, you won gold. You also competed in a race that you weren't originally supposed to compete in and won gold in that as well. And I almost, as I'm hearing it, I'm like, there is a huge element of pressure. If you were just under an immense microscope, like microscopically pressurized all the way down, like huge amount of pressure. And because you had all that pressure on you, when you got to the games and were able to just actually get out and compete and to race, the valve started to release and it was just like, wow, I have all this pressure that was built up. Let's just go really fast.
Yeah, well, it's super interesting. So I had a tremendous amount of pressure on me for the track race, and I almost had the opposite for the road race, because going into the road race, I wasn't selected originally. Team USA Cycling actually tried to talk me out of it, because they said, look, you have a race 2 days later. You have a 6% chance of earning a medal according to our simulations. And so we don't think you should do the race. And so they really tried to convince me not to do it. And I had like all these reasons why I thought I could do well. But then I started second guessing myself. Like, am I being arrogant? Am I being cocky? Do I really have a chance at a medal? Maybe they're right. And ultimately, I had to trust my instinct. I really thought I could do well. But going into that race, like, no one else thought I could do well. I called my coaches, I called my team, and they all said, yes, you could do well, but we still don't think you should do it, because you should prioritize Team Pursuit. And they really felt that I might not recover between the 2 races. And so I had to prepare myself going into the Olympics. I had to prepare myself mentally for this race where no one had any expectations of me. No one wanted me to do it. No one thought I could do well. And so I had to basically build a tremendous amount of self-confidence to try and even do the race. And then I went in as this huge underdog where like no one believed in me. And then I went over to Team Pursuit, which was the total opposite. Everyone had expectations that we would earn hopes and expectations and pressure that we would earn a medal, not just, do well, but earn a medal. And so I feel like going into the Olympics, I really had to mentally prepare for 2 totally opposite situations. And that required a lot of mental preparation and focus. And I really had to kind of clear my mind for each race. And as soon as one race, I couldn't think about Team Pursuit during the road race because it was just a totally different mindset. And then as soon as the road race was over, I was like 100% in the Team Pursuit mindset of like managing pressure, and so I think the years and years of being in both types of situations throughout my athletic career, being the underdog, being the favorite, and having to manage both of those expectations actually prepared me really well for the Olympics, where I had 2 totally different mental situations I had to prepare for.
That makes what you ended up doing so much more incredibly impressive. Like, it was already absolutely insane that 2 days apart you won gold medals in 2 completely different disciplines. But the fact that you then, not only it's like 2 different disciplines, 2 different mindsets, 2 different support systems, like everything about your 2 races was different to their core. And it is so phenomenal that you ended up earning the same results in both. It's a testament to you, like your strength, like your physicality. Obviously, there's a testament there. But again, it goes it goes back to what we've talked about of like this overwhelming amount of mental strength that it took to really push in each of those. And I'd love to hear what the recovery process was for you in between races and what your mindset was going in, because that's a very exciting win on the road side of it was Team USA's first medal in 40 years. And not only was it the first medal, like any color medal in 40 years, but it was a gold medal. And so it's that super high. What was it like coming off that super high of no expectations that came from anybody and having to really mentally prepare yourself and be your own support system to then going in with these expectations? What was your mindset shift like going into the second race that you had?
Yeah, it was really funny actually. So I crossed the finish line of the road race, and before the road race, I had gone to the coach at Team Pursuit and I said, "Look, I really want to do both races. I promise you that the moment the road race is done, I will be 100% focused on Team Pursuit. I will focus on recovery. I will spin my legs. I will hydrate. I will eat. I will stretch. I will do everything I need to prepare myself for the Team Pursuit." So I crossed the finish line of the road race and I'd won, but I just kept spinning. Like I kept pedaling way past the finish line and everyone was like, "Why isn't she stopping?" And like doing a big victory pose. And I was like, "I have to spin my legs. I have a race in 2 days. Like I promised my coach I would warm down." And it's so crazy to the spectators that was my mindset, because I just won a gold medal. Like I just done this massive feat. And the first thing on my mind when I crossed the line was I have to prepare for my next race in 2 days. And I didn't even have time to process what I'd done. And then the cameras all started coming over and flooding me. Someone gave me a flag. They took me off my bike. And that was when I was like, oh, wow. Okay, like I can enjoy this moment. And it was funny because it was, like half an hour of like cameras and media. And then, the celebration ceremony was after with the podium. And then I ended up getting back to my hotel at like 11 p.m. But then, it was just like this dichotomy. Like I was really torn inside because I was like, I want to celebrate this incredible thing. But like I'm still in the middle of it. Like I'm not at the end of my Olympic journey. Like I'm in the thick of it. And I have to remember that. And I can't celebrate too much because I really need to perform again, and I think a lot of people would have gone out and celebrated, seeing their friends and family, had some champagne. And I wasn't in the state where that would be helpful to me. And it was what I wanted to do, but I knew that I owed it to my teammates to really do everything I could in those 2 days to prepare for the next race. And so really the next day, actually on the car ride home that night, like I did not check social media. I did not check my phone. I put my phone away. I like ate my food, drank my water, had my recovery shake, and I was 100% focused on my next race. Like I could not celebrate what I had just done. And it seems so crazy to people that I didn't, like, the world was celebrating, America was celebrating, USA Cycling was celebrating, and yet I, the winner, like I did not celebrate that night, really. I popped a bottle of champagne, really quickly when I got home and then put it down. But the celebration had to come after. Like it had to come at the very end. And I had to stay focused because, with your emotions, like what goes up, what comes down, or what goes up comes down. And I knew that if I got in this massive high before my race, I would just be exhausted. I would have like the crash, and I didn't want to be overstimulated 2 days before my race because that's not how you prepare. And so basically to answer your question in short, I mean, I had to mitigate the emotions I felt and the celebrations that I could do. And I had to wait until after everything was done to do that.
So then my follow-up comes of how much of an emotional wave was after the second race, because you were so locked in. It's very, very impressive that you were able to lock back in and just immediately go. I find it hilarious that you were just spinning your legs immediately after the winning gold, that they had to like peel you off your bike just so that you could put a flag around your side. It's amazing. It's the athlete's mindset that's so absolutely incredible to me, of hearing that just like, no, I have a big win. Yeah. But like I have another race. I need to lock in for this. I can't celebrate this yet. How big of a celebration was after the second one? Were you able to just let that full emotional release happen?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I was so exhausted that I would say it was more it was more relief than celebration. I think the celebration came like a week or two after. But when I finished the Team Pursuit and I looked up at the clock, like I didn't even look at the times. I saw that the USA was on top, and my entire body just relaxed for the first time in almost a year and a half. Like, I mean, okay, no, I'd like relaxed before, but it was the first time where I was like, wow, there's no pressure on me right now. And it was the first time in 2.5 days where I was like, I can actually celebrate right now. Like I can enjoy this moment, what I've done. I can feel the emotions that I haven't really allowed myself to feel the last 2 days, And I think it was just this overwhelming flood of emotions, and it was an exciting moment. It was so amazing because also I had like 30 friends and family, extended family who'd come over to watch. And after the road race and after the first round of Team Pursuit, like I actually didn't see them because I was like, I don't want to see, like, I love that you guys are here. I feel the support, but I really need to be locked in. And so I'll see you guys after my races. And then after the races, the first thing I did was I went outside the velodrome and I gave everyone a hug, and it was just so nice to be with them and let all the emotions really flow that I hadn't felt, But I would say it was so much relief. Like it was relief more than elation in a lot of ways.
That's fair. I mean, I can only imagine the amount of like overwhelming relief of like, okay, we did it. The expectation was met and exceeded. Obviously, you again, going back to it, you won a freaking double gold medal, which is pretty amazing. It brings a tear to my eye to know that you really got an opportunity to just release and have that full emotional and physical release and just get the chance to hug your family when the time came and when the end of that race happened. And obviously the celebration was going to be a big factor no matter what. And I think that just like a huge testament to all of the work that you put in, just like letting yourself be exhausted. I know that you mentioned that you were like, I did get to rest at some point over the 1.5 year span, but really we talked about just that hyper pressurized situation of you for a 1.5 years were managing these expectations, really, really pushing yourself to the absolute highest level that you could possibly push yourself to achieve what you were looking to achieve. And so knowing that you got that release and that you really got that time to spend with your family and to immediately be able to just hug them after all of it, it's really special.
Yeah, no, it was great. And I think, that's how I think as athletes you have to be sometimes. You have to be so locked in the moment and focus on what you can control, focus on the process, focus on the here and now. And then afterwards you can just let it all out. And I think being able to go in and out of those two mindsets is actually a skill that you develop over time, but it was absolutely necessary at the Olympics.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine. It's a really highly developed skill, and it's really impressive that you were able to do it. And then also simultaneously just like so special to be able to get that celebration and to obviously have a relaxed celebration to start, but then a higher celebration to finish. It's pretty phenomenal. Well, Kristen, I have just our last little series of questions here for you. I seriously cannot thank you enough for taking the time today to really share your journey and share all the ins and outs of this whole really, really cool process of transitioning and entering athletics, entering your sport later, not athletics. Obviously, you were an athletic kid, but just hearing your whole journey has been really amazing. And obviously, it's been wonderful to follow you. And I can't wait to cheer you on at the World Championships very shortly around the corner here. But to cap off our session here, I just am going to cue you in with our Strong Girls United series questions. And for our returning listeners, you know them and you love them, hopefully. And for our new listeners who are tuning in for the first time, our Strong Girls United series questions follow the pillars of our nonprofit, which are strong bodies, kind hearts, and unstoppable minds. And so, in the spirit of the pillars of our nonprofit, I want to ask you, Kristen, first off, how do you keep your body strong?
I eat really healthy. I try to have a lot of vegetables and protein and the right amount of carbs and make sure that I'm fueling myself as much as I need for training. I think the worst thing we can do is underfuel, and then we end up being tired and, losing muscle. And so I work with a nutritionist and make sure that I get enough food every day and I sleep 8 hours and hydrate. And I think those things are the most important. I think they're as important, if not more important, than the training.
Could not possibly agree more with you on that one. Now, next up, how do you keep your heart kind?
I call my friends and family every single day. I would say I call my mom every single day. I think I just have, no matter how old I get, I'll always, call my mom. And I think she keeps me really grounded. I think another thing I do is I always try to see things from another person's perspective. I think anytime I feel like frustrated or overwhelmed with anyone, the first thing I do is just try to see the situation from their perspective. And it always makes me feel like I never feel like antagonistic towards them when I do that.
Oh, That's precious. I love that you call your friends and family every single day. I do the same thing. It keeps me grounded and also keeps my heart kind. So can relate to that one pretty heavily.
Yeah.
Now, last, but most certainly not least, how do you keep your mind unstoppable?
I would say I'm really good at visualizing my goals, and I dream about them a lot. I actually call it daydreaming. Some people, even my teammates, make fun of me because I'm like, "Oh, I'm daydreaming right now," you know. And it's like, I do though. I daydream about my goals all the time, about my 2-day goals, about my 5-year goals, my 10-year goals. But I think that level of motivation, it really keeps me focused on what my goals are, and I think about them a lot, and I picture myself on the podium. I'm not afraid to dream really big. And I think when I dream big, it really motivates me to keep going. And I think, when you fall, you get back up because you're just so focused on the end game. If you fall, it's like, oh, it's a fall. I'm still going for my goal, and I often say it's not a matter of if I'll keep going, it's a matter of how. And I think that's an approach I often take to like the really hard times is like, it's not a matter of if I'm going to make it through. It's just, how do I make it through? How do I get up? How do I keep going? How do I solve this problem in front of me? So I think when you have that mindset of it's not a matter of if, but how, I think it really makes for an unstoppable approach to problems and challenging situations.
Wow. You ended it giving me goosebumps again. I'm like fully goosebumped out. That was amazing. Kristen, thank you so much again for coming and joining today. I really am so grateful for you making the time, and I'm so excited to keep on rooting you on in this journey, and congratulations on just all you've done and are doing.
Thank you. It's so nice. I really enjoyed our conversation. And thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm a huge fan of the initiatives behind this podcast. And so I hope to see more strong girls out there. And I'll cheer you on as you guys do your sports as well.
Absolutely. Now, for everybody who tuned in today, thank you so much, like Kristen said, for joining us for another episode of Strong Girls Pod. I'm your host, Charlie Ekstrom, here with Kristen Faulkner, and we are signing off. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today on Strong Girls Pod. In the spirit of growing community and inspiring strong girls and women everywhere, please subscribe, rate, and leave a comment about our podcast. Tell your friends, family, really everyone to listen in and enjoy. This podcast is sponsored by Strong Girls United, a nonprofit with a mission to empower girls to be strong, confident, and resilient through sports mentorship and mental health programming. Visit sgunitedfoundation.org to learn more on how you can get involved today.